YouTube? Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. Good to be back. Yesterday was eventful. Oh my goodness. Hopefully you guys are having a good day. I'm definitely having a better day than I did yesterday. Still a lot of things I'm trying to catch up on right now. But we're not here for that. We're going to be talking about the weather. And we have some active weather right now, and it's only going to get increasingly active as we push towards the weekend. So we're going to go ahead and dive into this bit by bit here. We'll start out with the southwest, where we see this little gaggle of activity here. A few storms developing here, and there's even a chance for a couple of marginally severe storms. Mainly the threat with this is hail and damaging winds, but tornado can't be ruled out with these. Likelihood of these going severe is relatively minimal, hence the marginal threat we have ongoing. But still has to be watched nonetheless, and it looks really cool on satellite, might I add. We still have the atmospheric river looking like it's getting ready to come into play once again, and now it looks like we're back towards Southern California, or the Southern California coast next. So unfortunately, buckle up, because we're getting back into the stew, so to speak. As we head further out to the east over towards Midwest, conditions are a little bit on the active side. Nothing crazy at the moment. However, this cold air is taking a little bit further of a dive south, and with this moisture flow from the atmospheric river, now the threat exists for showers and thunderstorms across this region. And once it meets with this cold air, we have a snow threat that we will be looking out for, stretching from Kansas all the way towards Wisconsin, maybe even the UP of Michigan, over the course of the next couple of days. Some moderate to heavy snowfall seems likely. May even have to check a couple areas for some sneaky ice. And then over to the south, things really start to pick up as we head towards southeastern Oklahoma and northeastern Texas, where we have an enhanced risk for severe weather, including a threat for very large hail. Can't rule out a few tornadoes and some damaging straight line winds, as this is likely to progress into, or to evolve into, a bow echo. And then we'll watch conditions redevelop over towards the Gulf Coast on Friday. So very active times ahead. We'll go ahead and actually start taking a look at what we've seen so far as well, and then we'll be going forward. We know the story across the western half of the country. The mountains are the main ones getting the action in regards to snow over the last 48 hours. So if we look at this here, no surprises, big time totals in the higher elevation peaks, getting up to about 1 to 2 feet. A little bit less than what we've been seeing recently, but at this point for them, it's potato. It's really more so over towards the northeast, where we've had the big time snow. This is a huge winter storm that we had just dealt with here. A lot of places got some healthy snow here. New York actually looked like they got stiffed on this one. But the further north you go here, the more impressive the totals got, especially over towards New Hampshire and Vermont, where some of these little higher elevations were getting up to about even 30 inches of snow. It was pretty much blizzard conditions over here. There was a chance of this occurring, but I wasn't entirely sold. The timing of the snow and the wind were going to be a key factor, and it looks like everything kind of came to fruition there. So it was impressive to see how that ended up. But these guys over here are a little bit more used to it than some of these areas further off to the west and to the south in particular. So I don't hear anything in regards to anything bad out here so far. We'll have to see what's We'll have to see how things continue to develop. But I have a lot of faith in these guys being all right here. Not saying that I'm not concerned, but But that's the snow situation. When we go to the rainfall situation out west, yesterday's analysis, or the analysis the day before, because we know how this all works. This is all looking at precipitation that has fallen by about 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. So there's still a large gap in regards to what happened the following day and what's currently happening as well. So these totals aren't final, so to speak. Well, they are and they aren't. It's not up to date, I guess. That's really the best way to put it. But there was some significant rain further towards northern Cali. We got some pretty impressive totals up to almost 8 inches in some spots. But for the most part, it wasn't widespread like we had been seeing throughout last week. Although, of course, that was over towards Southern California, especially the Southern Cali coast here. But when we go to today, however, this is yesterday's analysis, by the way, if I hadn't mentioned it before, much different story, unfortunately. A lot of those same areas that have been hard hit over the last couple of weeks over towards the coast here from areas like Santa Ana, Long Beach, Santa Barbara, and areas a little further northward. It looks like we got another big dose of rain here. And really, at this point, any amount of rain is insult to injury at this point, unfortunately. So this will be another event that will be one to remember and one that could very well go down in the record books. This year will probably go down in the record books as one of the wettest starts to a year that we've had out west, because the amount of rain that these storms have been dumping over this area has been ridiculous. But from what we can see right here, based off the legend, we're seeing areas where we could have seen up to about maybe 5 to 6 inches of rainfall, unfortunately. Not the news you want to hear if you're in this area. So, very frustrating news to hear. I'm hoping that these guys can catch a break soon, or that really this atmospheric river stops, because that would be lovely right now for them. Give them a chance to at least clean up. That being said, let's go to the severe side of things. Here's that marginal threat that I've mentioned earlier here. As far as storm reports are concerned, there's nothing there. We head towards Thursday, though. Here we go. Right over here, this includes Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, Plano, Garland. I'm not as familiar with some of these cities towards southeastern Oklahoma. So unfortunately, I'm not able to name any right now. If you happen to be watching this video in Oklahoma and you see this, feel free to name a few towns off for me, by the way. I'm always happy to learn new things. That being said, our slight risk exists all the way into Norman and stretches all the way as far south, well, even further south than San Antonio. It stretches back. I don't even know where some of these towns are. I saw them in that last live stream I did, but it stretches out as far back as almost Abilene, and then stretches as far east as parts of northern Louisiana, well past Shreveport even. And we got a good portion of southwestern Arkansas that we're watching too. The threat with this mainly is wind and hail. In fact, there's even a hatched risk with the hail threat, of course. This is over towards Dallas, Fort Sill, or just to the east of Fort Sill. But there is a tornado threat here. There's a very notable tornado threat. It's a 5% area. That's slight risk criteria. And this stretches from Shreveport all the way as far south as Lufkin. Dallas, Fort Worth, you're in there as well. And areas to the south of Norman, we're watching you too. But you aren't just included in this. You do have a 2% area. Little Rock, you even have a 2% area. Alexandria, you're on the cusp of this 2% area. Then we have Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Waco, and even Wichita Falls in line for this as well. So tomorrow could be a pretty active day. We'll see what ends up coming of that. And then, of course, when we look towards tomorrow or the following day, Friday, we have a very small slight risk area that's isolated to the Gulf Coast here. So this stretches from New Orleans even as far east as maybe Panama City. I'm thinking, again, the main threat is wind and hail. Can't rule out a tornado, especially with there being off chance of a few offshore supercells. And we'll go ahead and get into the parameters with that in just a second. So, again, very active times ahead as far as the severe and the wintry side of things. We'll start out by looking at the temperatures. This will kind of cover both ends for right now. We have a pretty stout warm sector still in place across a lot of the southern plains. And then, of course, here's our cold air coming in courtesy of the polar vortex, unfortunately. So that cold air sneaks in, clashes with the warm air later in the day, and this frontal boundary is going to develop here, and this is how our storms are going to end up being triggered. You can actually see it almost perfectly based off of this temperature map alone. You almost don't even need to look at anything else. You can tell that just something's up based off of that. If you don't see what I'm talking about, I can mark it for you right here. Yeah, you see where I'm circling this part right here, and then watch what happens as I go towards the back end of this circle. Here's that cold air there, and then right around here, there is our front. Clear as day, and I know I drew that badly. I'm sorry. But simply put, proof's in the pudding. Front comes in, forces storm initiation, and then this front pushes south. In those same areas that we're seeing 70 and 80 degree temperatures, by morning we could be seeing sub-freezing temperatures already. By early to mid Friday morning, this front pushes to the south. Then warm sector starts to develop. Areas further to the south here could be in line for a little bit of severe weather. Areas a little further to the north, it's just not going to be unstable enough for that to really unfold here. You could get a few good claps of thunder though. But we could also be watching Saturday over towards the mid-Atlantic coast for maybe some severe weather. Probably going to be early in the morning, late in the evening on Friday with that. And then we'll maybe be watching things clear out by Saturday, late Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon. By that point, though, also the cold air is really going to start to root in at that point. So that's what we're looking at with temperatures. We'll switch it over to the dew points here. And we'll start out pretty much by looking over here towards our moist sector here. We already know where that's going to be. And it's pretty much going to be the same deal as what we're seeing with the temperature map here that we just looked at. There's that dry line. Highlight it with that perfect contrast here. 60 degree dew points here. 36 degree dew points here once you get past the dry line and the cold front. And then we see a similar deal heading into Friday. The most moist dew points are going to be, of course, towards the Gulf Coast. Hence why there is a greater chance of severe weather there. Although some 60 degree dew points do make it as far north as even Atlanta. So that's not something to be taken lightly either. While I think the threat will stay well south of you guys, I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe a marginal risk sneak a little bit further to the north too. Really, it's going to be the other parameters that are a key determining factor with that. But as far as the low-level jet's concerned, I'm not really seeing anything that's super pronounced in the short term as far as Friday is concerned. Now, tomorrow, Thursday, different story there. Look at the wind field. Look at the this little maximum that pops up here as we head into late tonight into early tomorrow morning. And this continues to hold out. And then we have one that reinforcing the atmosphere around it as we head into the evening and overnight hours. So between these two low-level jet maximums, or jet streaks as you would call them, I would not rule out the chance of maybe a few tornadoes developing with that. I see multiple points here where we get to about 40 to 50 knots, more than sufficient enough for severe and even tornadic development, given the other parameters. We can go ahead and take a look at the sounding. This one's leaning towards marginal severe, thankfully, and this storm actually looks elevated, but that's partially due to the cap that we have here. There's a capping inversion, but that will be breaking as that cold front comes in and lifts and ends up lifting the top off of this. So that being said, let me see if I can get a better sounding here. I might try again a little later, actually. Okay. I think this would be a more ideal time if it'll load. Uh-oh. Okay, there we go. It's a better example. Marginal tornado threat cap is struggling to lift here, though, still, although it is a much weaker cap nonetheless. It's a pretty solid low-level hordeograph here. Does seem like it could slightly inhibit tornadic development, though. There's an elevated mix layer here, and this is probably where I'm starting to nerd out more or less. There's an elevated mix layer here that's moderately impressive, could come into play for helping tornadic development. A lot of moving parts with this. A little bit uncertain with the tornado threat. We'll see how it trends by tomorrow morning because I'll make another update video between now and then. So we'll move this forward. Here's that jet streak continuing to progress. And then we'll see some increased coverage a little further to the south here. But for the most part, it's going to be relatively marginal, especially in comparison to Thursday. Still could see a low-level jet of about 35 to 40 knots, right at the bare minimum, you would say, for severe development. But the threat is there, so that does warrant a little bit of attention. I don't expect Friday to be a super active day, though. I think it's going to be on the lower end of the slight risk tier here. But that's what we have going on with the low-level jet. Let's go ahead and then look at the Cape values. If you watched my video on Monday, by the way, we also took a look at the capping inversion, and it was still pretty strong over this region, and that's going to continue to be the case here. So what ends up happening, of course, when that front comes in, it's going to basically remove that little layer of warm air aloft, and we'll start to see things kind of develop a bit. But under where that cap is, we have some pretty strong Cape values here. We have Cape values above 2,000 here. This kind of leads me to believe there could be an increased damaging wind threat here. And then also, if you really look at things here, like as far as the low-level helicities, this has a look of maybe even inhibiting a little bit of tornadic development. Doesn't really have that look to me of a impressive sounding analog, but nonetheless, the threat is there. Does have that classic supercell look, but that low-level shear definitely kind of gives me that little side-eye look like, this isn't really looking like it's going to produce. Of course, stuff like this is prone to changing. It often does leading up to an event, so just because it doesn't look impressive on this sounding here does not mean you should disregard it entirely. One thing to definitely not disregard is the Cape value that we're seeing here, where we're looking at almost 2250 in joules per kilogram. And it's a very impressive sounding here in regards to just severe weather overall. A couple of points where we get some good lapse rates here. This definitely leans into more of a hail threat, especially as we look at this little lapse rate here at the mid-level and even heading towards the low level. So it's going to be interesting to see how those storms perform as we hang on that Texas-Oklahoma line here towards the Red River. So we move this forward. We still get increased Cape over here. We're getting all the way up to even 2,000 joules down here towards northern Texas here. And then, of course, we start to lose that with the lack of daytime heating. We do get a little bit of resurgence here towards the coast. We could get up to about 500 to 1,000 joules per kilogram. But really beyond that, there's not really much more in the way of parameters that really concerns me. I mean, we took a look at the wind shear, just wasn't really there, which is honestly a good thing. That being said, let's just take a look at the country as a whole and get a good look at what our precip could look like across the entire country here. Picture's pretty active right now, as we mentioned before, just based off the satellite. We know that there is a chance of some snow and severe weather developing as we head into Thursday. This will really start in the morning hours, especially as far as the snow is concerned. The snow will work its way east of the Rockies here from Colorado here. Surprisingly, even though it starts out east of the Rockies, Denver actually looks like they get stiffed a little bit as far as totals. A lot of the totals seem like they're going to be a little bit more impressive further to the south, which is kind of crazy considering the track of this system. But as far as this swath of moderate to heavy snow here, pretty much looking from southeastern Colorado through a good chunk of Kansas, a good part of central Nebraska, and then South Dakota gets in the action here too. And they look like they could get some pretty impressive totals. This also looks like it's going to be wet snow, so if the kids are out of school by chance, which I don't really think they would be in this situation, given how things are there normally, this would be a good snowball fight weather for sure. We'll watch this go through Minnesota, and then eventually we start to see those totals begin. Those snowfall totals start to accumulate over towards the UP of Michigan and parts of northern Wisconsin. To the south, actually, it looks like a lot of areas are going to see a good bit of rain, especially out ahead of it, which is really interesting, which is also indicative of the warming trend we've been on and just how strong that air mass is as well. Here's that elongated line of storms that I was talking about here with the severe weather threat. We'll see this progress over towards Arkansas and then Louisiana by late Thursday night into the overnight hours. Probably see a downtrend in severe weather at that point, and then we may see a little resurgence here as we head towards Friday afternoon across the Gulf Coast states. Not very impressive as far as looks are concerned with the reflectivity right now, but we'll be continually watching that to see how things continue to develop. Doesn't really even look like there's too many in the way of offshore supercells, so that could keep the tornado threat down, thankfully. But we'll see how things progress with that too. You never really know until the day of. That being said, go ahead and take a quick look at the snowfall totals. It's a quick moving system, so the totals are going to be a little bit more limited. But even so, we're still seeing a potential for 3 to 5 inches across a good portion of Nebraska here, South Dakota as well. And then once we get to Minnesota, that's where the totals get really impressive as that low starts to deepen. This does track north of the border here, so it actually looks like this time, as far as the Northeast is concerned, we might be getting spared here, which would be nice, especially after what we just experienced over there. Of course, over towards the Rockies, we're expecting some pretty good totals. Again, here's Denver right here, looking like they're possibly going to get stiffed by this. This is, of course, looking at the Euro. We're doing our model comparison. Here's a Canadian, which we normally disregard, but we'll take a look at it this time. It's a pretty similar look. A little bit more snow further to the south here, even towards Iowa and Missouri here. I think you guys are probably going to be too warm for this setup, though. And then the storm track itself as a whole looks like it trends a little further south, honestly. I'm kind of leaning away from that, though, to be honest. I've really been seeing this storm trending more and more to the north, if anything else. And then, of course, is the GFS. GFS and the Euro are in pretty good agreement. That's usually a good sign. Here is the NAM. The NAM's kind of leaning slightly towards the Canadian, but not by much. I think it's a little bit more GFS oriented than Euro, though, as well. We do see an interesting little patch here where we see more of North Dakota getting into the action as far as snow is concerned there. Here's the NAM 3 kilometer. Based off of what we saw here, it pretty much lines up perfectly with that. Increased totals over here towards Maine, of course. But I think those totals are going to be a little bit higher once we get further into the weekend. The snowfall totals here across the Northwest are really starting to downtrend now as we're starting to get on that warming trend as well, which is somewhat good news and also bad news because that melting snow, that melted snow is going to turn into water, head into those valleys, and this is going to only exacerbate the flooding situation, unfortunately. But that's all the main models we have here. And then, of course, the last thing to look at is the blend of models. And then, of course, we'll go ahead and look at ice too. Blend of models is really stingy with the precip here as far as snow is concerned. Really, the only area that could be seeing impressive snowfall would be over towards northern Wisconsin, where we could potentially see some spots up to a foot. Then, of course, the UP of Michigan. Everywhere else, we're seeing mostly 1 to 3 inches, maybe less in some places. Here's this little patch over the Rockies where we could be seeing impressive snowfall, but beyond that, not a whole lot going there. Look at ice. Ice isn't really that impressive either. Mainly leaning towards rain or wet snow. There's not really a warm layer of air aloft where we're expecting that frozen precipitation to be, so ice is going to stay pretty limited, looks like. We'll still be on the lookout for it, but I'm not expecting a whole lot to come from that. But that being said, that's the end of this video here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Good to be back. We're going to get better. We're going to get into the swing of things again. Because sheesh. But anyway, enough reflecting on that. You know what to do if you liked this video. If you found it useful, hit that like button. Subscribe already if you haven't. I'm saying things all backwards. Share the video, of course, and then definitely let me know in the comments what you might be looking for in your area, or ask me what you're looking for in your area, and I'll be happy to find out for you. That being said, this has been Tire Metalhead Weatherman. I'll probably have a video for you guys tomorrow morning, assuming everything goes okay. But until then, take care, and I'll see you soon. Have a good night.